Hello, everyone, and welcome to Educause Shop Talk. This is a really interesting episode that we have ahead for you. And if you're interested in agentic AI for increased efficiency related to things like software development and enterprise systems, this is a great episode for you. In this one, we talk to Brian Zahn and Eric Markle from the George Washington University about a project that they are in the middle of related to modernizing their student information system and human resource system through the Banner SaaS platform. But they actually use an agentic AI solution that they co developed to do that implementation more efficiently. And so this is kind of a case study of their work. We get into some really technical elements. You will see the limits of my technical expertise in talking about these kind of things. But then we also talk about the important change management elements, how they worked with different stakeholders at the institution to set guidelines, and how they've been able to use this solution in other, even unexpected areas of the institution. So I hope you will check it out and enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Educause Shop Talk. I'm Sophie White. I am a content marketing and program manager at Educause and one of your co-hosts for today's discussion.
And I'm Jenay Robert, and I'm your other host.
Great. So today we're talking about agentic AI and higher education. And we're really excited to be having this discussion. It feels like a topic that's bubbling up quite a bit in our community. And we're thrilled to be here with two guests today who've been working really closely at their institution with agentic AI. So they're going to talk to us about the larger landscape as well as a really fascinating project that they're working on. So first we have Brian Zahn. Brian is a senior enterprise systems analyst at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He's focused on digital transformation initiatives, including a major ERP modernization effort and the rollout of agentic AI development workflows across the IT organization. With more than 10 years of experience in higher ed IT spanning multiple public universities in Ohio, Brian specializes in enterprise systems, workflow redesign, and practical approaches to using emerging technologies to accelerate institutional transformation. Thanks so much for being with us, Brian.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Next up, we have Eric Markle. Eric is an Enterprise Systems Developer 3 at the George Washington University. Eric has 25 years of experience in higher education with 14 years at George Washington. During his career, he's worked in web development, content management system administration, continuous integration, continuous deployment workflows, and enterprise systems development. Eric is currently a technical lead for the Banner SaaS modernization project at George Washington and has begun to work extensively with agentic AI to streamline and enhance the development of system integrations. Thanks so much for being here, Eric.
Thanks for having us. I'm happy to be here.
Great. So you all have some big projects going on. We're not going to talk too much about ERPs and the Banner SaaS modernization, but you have a lot of big projects on your plate, it seems.
That's putting it lightly. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think what you mentioned there, we'll talk a little bit about it just because it kind of was actually the catalyst and the impetus for our work with agentic AI. So yeah, would be happy to get into that.
Yeah. Do you want to just jump in with what is the connection or the catalyst to this work? I'd love to hear that history.
Yeah, for sure. So as mentioned during the bio, we are going through currently a major ERP modernization project. So we've had Banner on-prem for over 30 years. So it's been pretty deeply embedded, heavily customized, as you can imagine, being around for that long. And we've been going through the process of getting everything migrated into Banner SaaS. So as part of that, there's a lot of workflow redesign, business process reengineering, but also a lot of technical debt. So meaning technical processes that we've had that need converted into Banner SaaS safe solutions. So as part of that, we had a backlog of hundreds of integrations and reports that needed to be converted. And Eric can speak a little bit more to that. I'm relatively new to GW. I've been here for about a year, so by the time I joined, we were already pretty far deep into the project. And so we were looking for anything we could do, any levers we could pull to really accelerate that development process. It was taking a lot of time. It's a pretty complex tool to do some of these conversions. And so that was kind of the impetus, for our foray into agentic AI coding. Eric, do you want to touch a little bit on some of the challenges?
Yeah. I can talk a little bit about the technical part of it. So we've had an on-prem banner for years. I don't even know, 20 years or so. And so the project is moving from on-prem banner to SaaS banner, and you think you're moving to the same system. It's pretty straightforward, but when you're going to the SaaS safe, we're moving from like Oracle database to Postgres. So queries need to change. We're going from coding customizations in PL SQL to now we're going to a low code method that they have in place in SaaS to be able to build these integrations. So there's a lot of different ways that longtime banner developers are having to change how they develop and work with the system. So that was a big challenge, moving from like these old school ways of doing development for banner to more modern web development kind of workflow.
Yeah, and
That's
go
go
ahead.
ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say, and to expand on that, so some of these tools, like Eric was saying, there's the change management part of this. So these tools were, complicated to learn. They're not simple and they're low code. So it was really a lot of manual work to do those conversions. So it wasn't just learning the new tool, but it was also just the aspect of, okay, instead of being able to, hand code PL SQL programs, now you're really switching the paradigm to a completely low code platform. So that was a kind of another challenge that we were experiencing there.
What were some challenges with the change management element that you found in this? Are there any that stick out to you as maybe the most difficult to manage in this transition?
Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about what that was like when you guys first were learning Data Connect and Insights and some of the Banner SaaS technologies?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, like one of the biggest things is like most of the developers that we have been like longtime PL SQL developers. The low code way that we're doing it is kind of more like JavaScript and switching into a completely different mindset of how you are developing a program. Losing direct access to the database, and having to use APIs to make those calls and things like that. And also this is not so much for the IT part of it, but kind of our business partners have become accustomed to us being able to customize the application directly, to add additions to it, to make changes to baseline functionality. And that's something that we don't have the option to do anymore in the SaaS environment. So that has been a big challenge. How can we rethink how we can do customizations in Banner and also do without them?
Yeah. So I think that gives some really good context in terms of what the challenge was that we were facing. So now we're going to fast forward to last fall. So I had been at GW for a few months, and actually our Agentic AI initiative actually initiated with a proposal that I submitted directly to our deputy CIO. And this was born out of a conversation that we were having of anything we could do to really accelerate this conversion process. So like I said, we were already into it, but we had a significant backlog. And these integrations, just to give you an idea of the time frame that it was taking, we're talking, 6 to 8 weeks for a single integration to be ported over into this technology for Banner SaaS, safe technology. So it was really a significant lift. So the initial proposal that I had put together, I was calling it an intelligent migration agent. I wasn't exactly sure what it was going to look like. But in my previous role, I had a lot of experience coding with various AI tools, was using things like Copilot, ChatGPT and Claude. And when I joined it at GW, what I saw was that the developers were using some of the web-based LLMs, so Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, to do, small translations. So maybe you have a small snippet of code, you want to have it converted from Oracle to Postgres. We should also note that that's part of this transition. So not just going from on-prem to SaaS, but we're also changing our database flavor. So a lot of conversion work that would have to be done manually. So the proposal, as I mentioned, was for kind of an intelligent migration agent. And our deputy CIO, and I have to say, we have really great leadership, and we've had a lot of support from the beginning. And I think the executive sponsorship was really one of the key drivers that allowed us to take this forward. And so we had a series of meetings with a couple of our vendors. So we met with Elucian and we met with AWS to kind of show them this proposal and what our vision was, which was we should be able to have an agent that we can give what our source programs look like on-prem, and it should be able to get us pretty close to that end result without that 6 to 8 weeks of manual work. So that was really what our vision was. And when we met with Amazon and we showed them this, they came back with a couple of tools that they wanted us to evaluate that they thought could help. And really that pushed us into, tailored tools for agentic coding. They had a couple, and so, in the industry right now, there's things like Cursor, things like Claude Code, OpenAI Codex. Their flavor of agentic AI coding tool is something called Amazon Q Developer, and then something called Amazon Curo. And they take a pretty unique approach. They encourage you to go through what they call a proof of value. So once we saw the tools, we decided to embark on this initiative with a proof of value team. Eric? I think there were 4 or 5 of us on that original team. And, we took a very practical, hands-on approach to it. So we set up meetings twice a week for about 30 minutes. And we started playing with these tools. And the original part was experimentation. So what can we do with it? We weren't exactly sure. We tried a variety of different use cases. We mentioned, the integration work. We looked at that. We had some reporting work. We tried working with that as well. A couple other tools in the SaaS toolkit. And we were quickly starting to see that there was definitely some value here, but there were still challenges because when you think about how these models work, they're trained on their corpus. They have general programming knowledge, which is very useful. So it knew about JavaScript. It knows about the languages and the frameworks. But what it was really missing was the specific context that we needed. So it was missing some of that GW specific context. It was missing some of that Elucian specific context. And so that kind of took us into our next phase. But before I get into that, Eric, anything you want to add, kind of from the early days of the proof of value and from your experience?
No, like you said, it was just like a lot of like evaluating the tools, figuring out how we could move from just general asking chatbots, how can I do this, to a more comprehensive approach to it.
Yeah. So from there, we then started to look at MCP. So MCP, kind of getting into some of the technical details here, but MCP is Model Context Protocol. And that provides ways that it's really a mechanism for allowing an agent, which is in one of these tools, to be able to interact with some third-party system. And so this was really the key to unlocking the value to be able to get that context that we were talking about that we're missing. So that GW specific context and that Elucian specific context. And so we set up a few MCP servers, and this all of a sudden now allowed the agent to not just have access to the knowledge about coding, but it had access to the Elucian documentation. And once we did that, we started to have some of what we called, in the early days, we were referring to them as aha moments. So different things that we didn't think were possible that now all of a sudden we knew it was. So I'll tell you one of the challenges we ran into with Data Connect, which is the tool for creating these integrations. It's a proprietary framework. So we don't have general knowledge. The LLMs didn't know about Data Connect. And we had some skepticism during the early days of the proof of value, where we weren't exactly sure, right? So I'm kind of an optimist, and I have been using the AI coding tools for quite a while. So I was all in. But we also, as Eric mentioned, some folks who have been doing this for a long time, they were a little bit more skeptical, and rightfully so, to be honest. But we had some of these moments where all of a sudden we saw it was able to generate a pipeline that was syntactically correct. At the beginning, we didn't even think that was possible. Now, it wasn't getting us from 0 to 100%, but just the fact that we proved it could do syntactically correct pipeline development, that was getting us from like 0 to 25%. At that point, we knew we were onto something, and we knew that we could potentially really start to streamline this process. So I also
question, just thinking about the change management element, do you feel like when you were able to prove that proof of concept that 25% was 25% in, people were seeing that it was successful and accurate, was that helping kind of build trust in this migration, or were you still kind of dealing with some skepticism at this point?
You want to take that one, Eric, from the early days?
I think, definitely from the leadership, we got a lot of excitement about it. I think we saw a lot of excitement from the other developers as well, too. We've started to have some other developers that are really trying to get on board with what we're doing with this, and see the value in it now.
Mhm. Okay. Just trying to understand, culturally where we are in this journey at this point. So thank you
Yeah.
for that pause.
I think there's always going to be some skepticism from certain developers in the use of it, because they've been doing this the same way for a long time. It's hard to change that. So we're dealing with not only changing how they work with the system, now we're also throwing on top of it having to use AI tools to do that as well. So you're changing how you're working in multiple different ways.
Right.
Yeah, and I think one thing I would add to that is we shared. So from the beginning, we were not doing this, as a secret, right? So this was a proof of value team, and as we were getting different wins, and again, I want to share some of the practical things we did. So we were having twice a week meetings. We also set up a Microsoft Teams just as a collaboration space, and we invited people to it. And as we were having wins, and I could think back, Eric would, copy and paste some of the prompts he put in, and he's like, "Wow, like look at what this did. I was having trouble with this data connect pipeline. I was able to throw this in and I got the answer, something that would have taken me hours before. I was able to get back in, 5 or 10 minutes. So I think part of that change management was really kind of evangelizing what we were seeing and socializing some of that. And I think that the more that people saw that, then there was started to get some buzz about Hero. People were like, okay, well, we kind of want to get involved in this now. We're seeing this, and there's some pretty good results. So I think it was sharing some of those early wins. We tried to be very intentional about that kind of from the beginning.
Yeah, and we get all the time now. People are like, "Hey, can you throw this in Kiro? Let's see what it does." I'm like, yeah, let's do it.
That's a good proof of concept in itself that people are now
Mhm.
coming to you to ask to use it. Great.
Yeah. And so one other note I want to make about that is we also had some what I would call unexpected wins along the way. So keeping in mind that our main goal from the beginning was how can we speed up integration development, we were also looking for some other repeatable patterns of things that we could roll out. Just things that were, they were happening frequently. They were kind of painful. How could we accelerate some of that? And I'll give you a really simple one, which was just doing diffs on files. So doing data comparisons. When you're doing a migration like this, you know, one of the ways you have to validate that your conversion was correct is you're going to run it out of SaaS, you're going to run it out of on-prem, and you're going to compare that and see if they match. And so it was kind of being done in an inconsistent way previously, where some people were, counting the number of records, some people were spot checking certain data points. And we realized that that's a very repeatable pattern that AI can handle that. Throwing that into these agentic tools and being able to say, go through, write a script that will do a comparison of these files, all of a sudden you're saving quite a bit of manual work and you're applying consistency. And so that was one of those kind of unexpected wins. We didn't really think that that was something we were going to use it for, but we found it. And then I want to share one second unexpected win. As part of this migration, we also had an on-prem job scheduler that needs to be migrated to a SaaS safe version of that. And it's a tool that's a bit, I would say, clunky to use, a bit difficult to use. And we weren't even targeting that with our initial proof of concept here. But as we realized what the tool was capable of, all of a sudden we found this also works for the job scheduler. And we were finding tasks that were taking, again, about 8 hours of manual work. Somebody might spend a day trying to troubleshoot through this. We'll call them job chains. Being able to export that as a text-based definition and feed that into the agent is able to parse through that with, of course, with the assistance of a human. And that's a core part. We'll get into that a little bit later on. This is it really, I view AI as very much as an amplifier. So it's not going to solve all your problems. If you're not knowledgeable of the existing technology, just giving you the tools, it's not going to solve all your problems. But that was a real big one for us. Just being able to say, wow, what we're learning, the lessons that we're learning with Data Connect, with our initial goal, we can now apply to some of these other technologies that we weren't even initially thinking about. So those were some of those kind of early aha moments that we had, and some of those quick wins back in the December time period.
Something I'm really appreciating about how this conversation is getting kicked off by talking about these unexpected efficiencies gained and so forth is that I think I've done a lot of research around how AI is impacting higher education, and specifically published a report not too long ago about the impact of AI on work in higher education. And one of the big limitations of this research for me consistently is that when I ask people about how AI is impacting their work, it almost ubiquitously folks consider generative AI tools like chatbots. And it's really difficult for us to dig down deeper and find some generalizable findings that relate to these more nuanced, specific uses of AI. And I think, as it goes with research, oftentimes when something is so new and so niche, you really have to get into case study basically. And so I'm just really appreciating that angle of this, that I think people can perhaps use this story to see how agentic AI specifically can improve workflows that it is being done at your institution.
Mhm.
No, that I think yeah, definitely agree on that. So now I want to jump to the beginning of the year. So we gone through our kind of our quick wins, right? So we had some of those aha moments, but we still wanted to get back to the integration development. That was our core problem. So going back to earlier in the conversation, it was taking 6 to 8 weeks. And although we had added in some of these MCP servers, we were giving it some additional context. It was still only getting us, as I mentioned earlier, about 25% of the way. It was syntactically correct, but it wasn't the whole thing. And so this is where we started to we took a step back, and Eric and I spent a lot of time together just going through brainstorming, looking at what we were getting and what our challenges were. And we said we need to refocus on Data Connect and see what can we do to speed this up. So as we went through this initiative, we also met with other groups within our IT organization. We were not doing this in a silo. So, of course, security, that's a big part as well. We brought them on early. We included them in the conversations, told them what we were doing. We showed them the tool. We also brokered some conversations with AWS, so they had a chance to ask them directly, made sure we got their approval, and they gave us some recommendations. The second piece is we also have a technical review board. So we made sure to present in front of them and showed them what we were doing at this point. We got some feedback, and we just again wanted to make sure that we were vetting the architecture and trying to get as many different perspectives as possible. And one of the things that came out of that presentation to the technical review board is again, we have great leadership on that side. We have a chief technical architect who had introduced the concept to me of a harness, which was new. So it was really this idea that we have the Agentic AI coding tool, but where is it operating within? We need to give it some framework that grounds it in the GW specific context. And this was where this concept of, a Data Connect harness came into the picture, which really takes it a step further. So when I think about the maturity of it, when we really started, we were going through and it was simply prompting it. You're kind of doing vibe coding. Then we moved into, the vibe coding plus MCP. So now we're giving it some external context sources. And then we move into the harness, which really allows us to give guardrails and to tell it and give it some rules. How exactly can you operate with these additional context sources? What do we want your output to look like? And so we spent some time architecting that and designing, what exactly rules do we want to build in, what guardrails and things like that. And eventually we got to a point where we had a working harness. And I think I want to let Eric kind of share the story once we got it built, what the end result of this was. And this has been just in the last month or so that we really hit I would say the tipping point where now we're at the point we're really getting a lot of value from the tool.
See, I told you Brian likes to push things off when we hear these questions.
Keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, he does. So I guess what Brian was talking about is like one of the big moments that we had recently was there was a pipeline conversion that I was working on. It was taking an original PL SQL program that ran through a process and generated PDF letters. So this is something that I estimated would probably take me manually to do at least 2 solid weeks of work. After we had the harness in place with kind of the knowledge base of how we have like samples of working pipelines already, we have the information about all the APIs that are available to us and things like that, the documentation for the pipelines. After I would say about 4 hours of prompting back and forth using the Curio tool, I had a 95% working Data Connect pipeline. It still has a little bit of work to go, but it completely it took the Jasper report, which that in itself for me to recreate. So like, it's a very structured form letter that has to be in a specific format that they can print out and send to people. For me, it'll be to do that manually, to convert it from, a Jasper report to HTML that is then generated into a PDF. That in itself would have taken me days of work to do to get it in the exact same format as before. So
what's a Jasper report? Just is that a GW specific thing?
no, that's kind of like it's kind of a tool they use for like Java programs to,
Okay.
yeah. So it's like a markup language to do PDFs in Java, basically.
Perfect. Thank you. This is
Yep.
you're seeing the limits of my technical expertise here. So
Yeah.
just trying to translate for folks who are less technical who maybe not be listening to this.
So yeah, so that, and I said it was exciting to see something that would have taken me 2-3 weeks of manual work in 4 hours. I had mostly done. So
It's incredible.
It is pretty incredible.
And to me, that's when we really, when we think about what this vision was, and it was kind of, again, it started with this initial proposal of an intelligent migration agent. We weren't sure what we were going to get. And I just think to get to the point where, we're able to consolidate, roughly 60 hours of work down into 4 hours of focused development time. I mean, that was huge for us. And to me, that really showed us the power of, what these agents can do. But it's not just about the agent. It's when you have an agent that's grounded in the specific context that you need for the particular use case. And I think that's, to me, that's the takeaway that I think other institutions can take back, is that if you take the time to architect the environment correctly, and you don't just say, okay, this is the agent, I'm going to ask it a generic question. If you really take the time to think through all the different contexts it needs. And one of the things when we were building this, I have to say, we spent a lot of time just going through and thinking through, what are you currently doing manually? All of those manual steps, because that was the key. You can't expect an agent to do what a human can do manually if it doesn't have access to everything that the human has. That was really the core part. So we had to map out all those steps and then make sure that the agent had access to all of those, and it had those, grounding context, those steering files, all of that defined just like the human would. And it was really, that was the value unlock for us, to where we were really able to see that. And now that we have this capability, of course, this is where it gets more into change management. So we've been working with a small group as we've been developing this. So now how do we scale it? And, one of the phrases that I kind of used from the beginning was, we want to make this be a force multiplier. It shouldn't just be in the hands of a few people. So we want this to really accelerate all of us and bring us all toward the finish line. And so, this, we call it templatization, is kind of another way to think about the harness. We're looking at rolling that out to additional developers. And we took kind of an interesting approach here. So we have given out about 20 to 25 Curo licenses to our Agentic AI tool. And from the beginning, I mentioned we weren't doing this, in secret. So we've been very open. We took opportunities at our technology focus groups where we presented on this, some of those early wins, as I mentioned, we showed folks. And then we would get requests after that. Somebody would say, hey, can we get a license for this? And we granted that, and then let them start to play around with the tool. So they got familiar with it without that harness. And now the next step, and I think this is where we're really going to see, again, more value be unlocked, is folks already know the tool. Now we're going to roll out the harness and get them on board with that. And that's when we're really expecting, to see, again, continued acceleration of our development timelines.
I just would say, I think it's exciting too, because, we're only like 3-4 months into this process. We've only been using the harness for like 3 weeks, maybe. So the fact that we're already getting this type of return with minimal training to it, and like examples of working pipelines, like I'm kind of excited to see how far this can progress. Like I don't ever see that it's going to completely take over and just like, all right, go convert this for me. Like you still need developers and analysts who know what the programs do and be able to analyze them and make sure that they're operating properly. But it's a huge time saver.
Yeah. And I would say one other thing also to keep in mind is that, we don't see where the gains are going to be evenly distributed. And so what I mean by that is, if we give 5 or 10 developers access, to this tool within this harness, we don't expect to see the same return from everybody, because again, it really is an amplifier. So somebody like Eric, really knows Data Connect well. He's been, working on it, prior to bringing in this tool. So we're going to see, we're expecting to see better results from those folks. So that's been one of the challenges, though. The change management is how do we bring everybody along, for the ride, and just a couple other ideas, and these things might be valuable to other institutions. We did partner with AWS, where they came in and they actually gave a workshop, and we opened it up to all of IT. So it wasn't just within our enterprise applications area. We posted it in one of our general channels, and we had a great turnout. Eric, what was it, 35, 40 people? Might have
Yeah.
even been more. Yeah, I mean, it was a pretty significant number of folks that were interested. And they came, and it was really just, showing what the tool can do. So, we've tried that. We're also looking at setting up a community of practice, in the future as well. We want to, share some of these lessons. One of the cool things about AI, and, I love AI. You can probably see I get excited talking about it, but everybody uses it a little bit differently. And so I learned from Eric. Eric learns from me. A lot of these sessions that we've had, at least my methodology is I like to sit with somebody one-on-one, and one of us will share our screen. It's kind of like going back to the days of pair programming. And I like to watch exactly how people prompt. I can give suggestions. We all do it a little bit differently. So even that's been helpful. I think what isn't effective is just giving a large presentation for an hour, letting people watch you, they hear you talk, and they're really not following. What I found with AI, especially with coding, because there is a pretty steep learning curve to these tools. They're not simple. You mentioned chatbot earlier. This is not just a chatbot that you can enter in and say, okay, convert this program. There's a steep learning curve. And I've found, success in having these one-on-one sessions, really the pair programming approach of just, let's talk through this together and let's see what we can get it to do. And it really seems to have worked, and it gets people excited.
Yeah, I love that really practical collaboration that it sounds like you're doing with the tool of, let's do a screen share and share prompts together to make sure that we're using it in the best way that we can. And I'm curious, Eric, about something you said earlier. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion about AI replacing jobs, and I could see from the development standpoint that that is a concern that's very valid of, if you create this thing that is able to take some of the hours out of your previous work, that could be concerning. But it sounds like you're also kind of harnessing and unleashing this AI tool in a way that enhances the work that you're doing. Kind of
Mhm.
what's your perspective here as a developer, and what do you see other developers at GW saying, if you feel comfortable speaking to that?
I can't really say what the other developers are saying. I know for me personally, like I don't see any time in the near future where AI is going to completely take over what developers are doing. It is going to fundamentally change how we code. I think just from this short time period of working with these tools, I can see that there's going to be very few instances where I just go in and just like start writing code anymore. I'm going to go consult these AI agents and use that right from the beginning to help me build out specs. And like I'm very much a vibe coder at heart. So like whenever I get a problem, I'll just go in and start knocking out code and not like really think about it and plan it. And I think specifically with how AI has progressed, like the spec driven development has been a big game changer for me, where I can go in and explain the problem to AI or have it analyze an existing program. It will generate a spec for me that tells me exactly what the program does, what we're looking to accomplish, and then it can generate a task list for me, and then we can step through every task within that list to actually finalize the program and the work that we need to do. And that's something that I wouldn't have done previously as a developer, just because that's not how I work. But I really see the value in that, and it's really helped my coding out.
So if I can add a little bit to that, Sophie, I think you raise a good question, which is, so what's really the impact, on the developers. So I think I have a little bit of a different view, which is that we have such a demand, for coding, and such a demand for new applications, that I don't see this, getting rid of jobs. I see this allowing us to deliver a lot more value and to deliver value quicker. I think the more that we're able to output, we're going to have more demand coming right in the backlog. So that's kind of how I see it. And then I think it also allows us, to reposition some of those resources to the more important things, the things that the students care about. Eric's heard me give this example, but one of the processes that we had to convert, it was the one of the payroll processes, that generates these direct deposit files. And, that might take, 60 or 80 hours. And, really, the students don't care about that. The employees do, but the students don't care about that. So I think if we can get to the point where these coding agents can take some of that administrative burden off of us, that's going to really unlock value. And, I think we could, build, again, things that are going to be more relevant to the students. We can build, experience cards within our portal, that surface data to them, in a more effective way. So I don't think it's about, getting rid of the work and getting rid of jobs. I think it's about allowing us to operate and, do more, value add work as opposed to just administrative work.
That kind of gets at the question I was going to ask, which is where this technology goes next for you and for other institutions. I mean, you've got a use case or two under your belt now, and so what are some of the specific things maybe already planned, maybe just dreams you hope you can someday accomplish with this? What's next?
So we're looking at, we've already started to form a backlog of additional harnesses that we want to build, and that's what's coming next. So we're really focusing right now on the integration development, but we want to build these for additional technologies in the SaaS environment. So that's kind of our short-term goal. The other goal that we're looking at is the model that we're building within enterprise applications. We've been doing, in conjunction with our chief technical architect. We want to expand that capability across GWIT. So not just within the enterprise apps, but we want to expand that, to other use cases and to other teams, and really allow, what we're building to kind of be a model. So that's where we see it. At least that's where I see it going next. Eric, what do you think? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I mean, for me a little bit, it's hard to judge where it's going to go from here because, like, part of the reason that we're doing this now is because we're helping us to get to an end goal of going live in the Banner SaaS environment. So we're going, we're doing this work in conjunction with the huge backlog of work that we have to get to that endpoint. So I think kind of thinking of it larger term outside of that has been a little bit on the back burner for now, but hopefully we will start to plan that out a little more.
And so one thing I would say also, you asked about other institutions. So I think that this is something that's coming for everybody. I think that part of why we're early on and why, we're kind of ahead of the pack is, to Eric's point, we had a catalyst. And our catalyst was we made a strategic decision to move our ERP to SaaS. And as part of that, we needed to accelerate that timeline to get to go live. I think a lot of other schools are, probably slightly behind because they haven't had that catalyst. But from my perspective, the world has shifted. Eric touched on this earlier. I think the days of coding things manually, they're gone, and everything's going to be shifting, toward this. You still have to develop. You still need to have, good, strong engineering background, strong engineering principles. None of that's going to go away. But, it really is something that I think once institutions have the pain, they have that need, they have to accelerate, they have to develop quicker. That's when they're going to start using these tools. It's, what do they say? Necessity is the mother of, all invention. So I think it's, that's the way things are shifting, from my perspective. And also something that Eric touched on earlier, and I don't know if you want to expand on this, but spec-driven development. We just think about, modern development workflows. That's a whole kind of a separate piece from, the agentic coding. Eric, do you want to show a little bit on that and, what you've seen, with your background in software engineering?
I mean, just like I mentioned, like, a lot of the talk with AI, you hear about like vibe coding, like anybody can come in and just start like, just start typing in prompts and it's going to generate an application for you. With the spec driven development, it does a lot of the planning work up front for you. So you'll give it information about your project and it will generate a plan for you. You can review that plan before you start any work. You can make modifications to it and make sure that it is the plan is sound based on what your knowledge of the project is. It can generate test cases, like so if it knows like what the outcomes are supposed to be, it can say, okay, here's what we're expecting at the end of this project that this program will do. And then it can use that to not only build the program for you, but it can also build like the test cases to validate that the program is doing what you wanted it to do from the beginning. So it's been a really helpful way to develop for me to kind of organize my thoughts, because that's not really how I think.
Yeah, the task list I thought was really interesting here. And I'm curious, I'm thinking about, you've talked about some of the internal stakeholders. Obviously, security is a big concern here, and I'd love to dive into that in a bit. But I'm also curious about, this is a really complex project that it sounds like involved Amazon and Ellucian as well. Do you have any advice for institutions on how best to partner on a big initiative like this if you have, a third party vendor that is really integral to the project?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So when we put together the initial proposal, one of the things that was included in there was a value matrix, and it was really showing what's the benefit to us, what's the benefit to GW, what's the benefit to Amazon, what's the benefit to Ellucian. What I see is this problem that we're solving is not unique to GW. And as I mentioned before, I think we're early on because our hand was kind of forced, by being an early adopter to SaaS. I would say those partnerships, I think it's critical. And, we had developed, and Eric has too, a really good relationship with our solutions architect. And we had a lot of meetings from the beginning where we were just, I think some of those initial meetings were just whiteboarding, and just brainstorming, thinking out loud, what's the problem that we're having? I always go back to, it's really important to map out the workflow. That was so critical. And once we map that out, we share that, with our vendor partner. They need to be able to see that so that they can tell us what tools do they have available that could fit that. So I think, for us that was definitely key, in getting things moving forward. And then, just as the project has continued, we've kept, our solutions architect involved. As I mentioned, he was willing to come in and gave a workshop, to GWIT. We meet at least, I would say, usually once every week or so, just to kind of touch base on how things are going. We've even thrown back some problems that we've run into, where we're trying this, we're not quite getting the results we're expecting. And he's been able to bring back some other solutions consultants that they have who are more knowledgeable about Hero. So I just think keeping that relationship and open line of communication has really helped us. So that's definitely something I would recommend, for other schools. But I think those vendor partnerships, keep them close, and keep them active.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I
it
don't know
sounds like
like what. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying, it sounds like you kind of co-created that workflow together with them from the beginning, so they had an expectation of what you were doing instead of bringing them in later. We have this vision, can you support it? So I really love that framework of working on the foundations first together. And sorry, Eric, I'd love to hear what you want to say.
I don't remember now.
Oh no.
I will say and institutions should not be afraid to reach out to peer institutions to find out what they're doing with these things as well, because I think we've all worked in higher ed for a while, and other institutions are generally pretty good about sharing what they're doing and how they're working with other peers.
You may have
Yeah,
just opened the floodgates when we publish this. We'll make sure that your email addresses and your personal cell phone numbers too, right, Eric? You want people to just text you with their questions? That's what I was hearing.
We'll give him Brian. He likes to talk.
There you
Oh,
go.
yeah, we're going to book over here.
all hours of the night. Perfect.
But I mean, I think so. I think to that point, though, Eric's right, and I would say, again, not just externally, but internally. So make sure you're not living within silos within your IT organization. And I think about the success of this, I think, and part of that was the vendor partnerships, but also partnering within other groups within IT. As I said, the harness concept originated. It was really a result of having that presentation at the TRB and being able to bring in some external perspectives. So I would also encourage folks, talk across your organization, your IT organization, and see what people are doing, share and collaborate. I mean, that's when that's when innovation happens, when you get differing viewpoints, you get people working together. So I think that was, one of the things that really helped us.
Yeah, and I'm going to be interested to see. I mean, we're a larger university, so we have a pretty large IT staff compared to like a smaller school. Like, how is the proliferation of AI and agentic tools going to differ for us as opposed to like a smaller IT shop that only has maybe like 10 people, where they can all be on board working the same way? We have, a large variety of people and how they work and what they do. So like, we're definitely not going to have a one tool fits all for every part of our IT department. So it's going to be interesting to see how this kind of flows out across the entire organization.
Yeah, and one thing I'd say that too, about tools, we've even seen this internally, where in terms of the specific, agentic coding tool, there's different tools that are being used, and I've talked to some other universities. Everybody's using different things, but the model that we've shared, during this podcast, this idea of harnessing it, giving it access to this different context, building guardrails, this can apply to any tool. And I think that's one of the beauties of this model, and that's why we're trying to share this, is that it's really modular and it's plug and play. So if things change in the future, want to use different models, we need a different tool, that can happen. And so I think that just keeping that in mind, don't get yourself too attached to a specific tool, a specific technology. Think bigger picture. Again, I go back to the engineering principles. Architecting things. You have to build a solid foundation. These tools, one of the dangers of them, Eric's probably going to laugh, and we saw this, is they can be very confident. And even at the beginning, we saw where they were very confident. So we're asking it to convert this pipeline. Comes back and says, sure, it's done, but it's not done. It does not look correct, so it's maybe 20% of the way there. And we even see, again, I find it kind of funny, but sometimes we'll catch it where it just makes something up. I'll say, well, why do you put that in the code? Well, honestly, I just guessed. I wasn't sure. But we've been able to get away from that, again, by giving those steering documents, harnessing it. That was really the game changer. And we can reduce some of those, hallucinations and guessing. So that's something else I would definitely encourage folks to do as they move forward. Some skepticism is good. We talked about that at the beginning. I'm all for being skeptical. I've used these tools quite a bit. So you have to keep that in mind. You don't want to be overconfident, but it's a balance. I mean, developing trust in the tools is, it comes with time, and again, with that proper foundation.
Yeah, and it just underscores what we talk about so much here and in other conversations about AI literacy being kind of the foundation of this. You're not going to be able to embark on a project like this without really understanding what those limitations are and continuing to maintain that the human is smarter than the machine. And you have to play the role that you're supposed to play. This is not a tool that you just offload all of your work onto. That's so key. And I wonder if that played a big part in some of the conversations with other stakeholders. Do you feel like people, perhaps peripheral to the core team that was working on this project, understood that element of it, that the time it would take to properly train the model, the importance of how you're working with the model, or is that something you had to bring people along with?
That is a very good question, and Eric and I were actually just recently chatting about this, where it requires time, and so that's been one thing that we've continue to communicate as we've given these presentations and communicating to the leadership, is that there's a learning curve, and you have to make that investment to get up to speed with this, because it's the world's shifting very quickly. These tools are coming out fast. Some of these things we're talking about, spec-driven development, that's its own topic, very large, even separate from the agentic AI. So that's, I would say you need to make that case, to your leadership, to be able to have some of that time that you can spend investigating these tools, and, the experimentation, and being able to just do some, personal learning, to get up to speed with this tech. Anything else to add there, Eric?
No, I would say, I don't think when we went into it, we even knew how much time it was going to take or what we were getting into. We didn't know what direction it was going to go, how well it was going to work. I think getting into building the harness and the knowledge of that was a big deal for us. And that's something that will take time for you to build properly. But it pays off in the end, the time that you put into it.
Fantastic. I think this feels like a pretty good place to wrap up, unless there's anything. Is there anything else, any other advice you have for other institutions that you feel like we haven't covered at this point and you want to leave us with?
I have a couple key takeaways. So I think the first thing I would say is you've got to identify your catalyst. That's the biggest thing. So you've got to find what's causing you pain and where do you want to apply this. And I think once you have that, the second thing is the executive sponsorship. And that was critical. We had the support from the leadership from the beginning. They're the ones that can help broker some of those conversations with security. They're the ones that can approve the funding to get the tools, and other ones that can help, protect some of your time to be able to, push forward with the initiative. So those would be my two big things. Identify the catalyst, find what your pain point is, and then get that, secure the executive sponsorship, early on.
Great.
And I had to say, I was just going to say, don't be afraid to adapt and accept different ways of doing things. Like, don't stick with the way you've been doing things for 20 years because that's how you know how to do it and that's how it worked. Like, be open to trying out these AI tools and learning how to use them properly, and you'll see the benefits of it.
That's a fantastic insight. And thank you, Eric, I think, for your honesty of just being open to this change. It's not always easy. And we know that change management is really sticky work in higher ed sometimes. So thank you for sharing that, mindset firsthand. And one thing you mentioned just before we wrap up, I think I have this cybersecurity hat on because we were just at our cybersecurity conference with Educause, and I'm thinking if I were a cybersecurity professional listening to this, I might be a little queasy of, we're working on this solution that's managing really sensitive information like payroll role documentation, et cetera. Do you have any, I think, advice for folks who are in security and might be worried about something like this, about how you address those guidelines in the development and the harness that you ultimately came up with?
So I would say I think a couple of things to that. So one thing is if you don't do anything and you just let people use their web-based tools, then you're lacking enterprise control overall, right? So then you're lacking visibility. People are going to go and do essentially do what they want. So I think when you do roll out an enterprise tool, such as Kiro, in the way that we did, we get some of those enterprise controls. So it's all through the identity center, right? So they're logging in through their institutional credentials. We have auditability, we have logging enabled through that. And I think the other part is just, encouraging and, teaching developers safe ways to interact with the models, right? There's always that education part of it. And we always push that. You shouldn't be copying and pasting, API keys into your prompts, or pasting in sensitive data. So I just think that education piece, is really important. And then I would also say, the tools themselves do provide some security measures and security controls built into them. I mentioned some of them earlier, but also, assurances that any of your data that you're sending, they're not training their models on your data. We get that, with our professional subscription to these tools. So I just think, getting in front of it, being able to, roll out an enterprise tool like this, you do get some of those data privacy and data security controls that you otherwise wouldn't if you get on this and people were just using the web-based tools. So that's kind of my perspective on it.
So that's helpful. So it's an education piece, and then it also sounds like you're intentional in the procurement of the tools and the way that you work with these solution providers as well to make sure it's fitting the needs that you have. Okay.
Absolutely. And
That
we've
is a
also asked our vendor partners for, different, again, guardrails is kind of what we call them. So
Mhm.
inside that harness, we tell it certain things it can do, certain things it can't. So that's another way you can harden your coding tool.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you for that. Another example of change management of, I'm putting my skepticism in and then you're helping walk me through how to address the skepticism in the name of security. So thank you. I think that is all the time we have, but thank you so much for sharing your lessons with us and how exciting this project is. I think this will be really valuable to other institutions as we're looking at how AI folds into the ways that we work in higher education and technology. So thank you so much for being here.